She walked in smiling, unaware her world was about to shatter. Within seconds, tears streamed down her face as doctors delivered a truth no mother should ever hear. A hidden diagnosis, weeks of secrecy, a palace scrambling to contain the fallout, questions that cut deeper than protocol. Why now? Who knew before me? And what does this mean for Prince Louis and the future of the monarchy? As whispers became schemes and tradition clashed with maternal instinct, one woman refused to stay silent. Catherine stood up, defied the palace, and for the first time spoke directly to the world. Louis is not broken, he is ours. She walked in smiling, completely unaware that the next few minutes would fracture her world beyond repair. Soft music played faintly in the background, disguising the moment that would soon define everything that followed. Within seconds, Catherine's calm exterior crumbled. Her composure collapsed as tears streamed uncontrollably down her face, the weight of the truth delivered by doctors striking with brutal force. It was the kind of truth no mother should ever be forced to hear. Questions flooded her mind faster than she could breathe. Why had this test been hidden for so long? Why had no one warned her? How had the palace, an institution built on preparation and control, been caught completely off guard? And most terrifying of all, what did this mean for Prince Louis and for the future of the monarchy itself? Before we unravel what this revelation truly means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. What unfolds next is not just a family crisis, it's a collision between motherhood, power, and centuries-old tradition. It had begun as an ordinary summons, the kind Catherine had answered countless times throughout her life in royal service. A quiet request, a polite tone, no sense of urgency, no hint of alarm, just another routine meeting, or so it seemed. Yet something about the timing felt wrong, subtly unsettling, as if the air itself had shifted before she even crossed the threshold. The palace corridors, long steeped in tradition and secrecy, had a way of whispering before they spoke, and this time the silence was overwhelming, heavy, deliberate, and unnerving. Inside the room, the atmosphere was starkly clinical, restrained, cold, far too serious for what she had been told were routine matters. Yes, Louis had undergone assessments. She had been reassured repeatedly that they were precautionary. Developmental check-ins, standard monitoring, nothing alarming, nothing that required fear. At least that's what she had been led to believe. But the faces across from her told a very different story. Tight expressions, carefully measured pauses, words chosen with surgical precision. And then came the language no parent is ever prepared to hear. Medical terms that sounded final, phrases weighted with irreversible consequence. The doctors didn't speculate, they didn't soften the blow. They spoke as though the conclusion had already been reached long ago, as if this moment wasn't a discovery but a delayed disclosure. That delay shattered her. The realization that something this serious had been unfolding quietly, hidden behind reassurances, wrapped in protocol, broke something inside her. Catherine's composure didn't crack gently, it collapsed completely. Insiders later described the sharp scrape of a chair against the floor, a sudden gasp for breath, trembling hands clutching the edge of the table as reality took hold. This wasn't confusion. This was shock colliding violently with guilt. The kind of guilt that asks impossible questions. How did I miss this? Who knew before me? Why am I only hearing this now? Within minutes, the palace machinery sprang into motion. Phones went silent, internal channels locked down, conversations stopped mid-sentence, orders were issued without explanation. Aides moved swiftly not to comfort but to contain information, to contain reaction, to contain Catherine herself as she was ushered away from prying eyes. Witnesses say she disappeared down a private corridor, her face pale, eyes red and hollow, the crushing weight of something irreversible settling onto her shoulders. Staff were instructed not to speak, not to speculate, not to remember what they had seen, because whatever had just been revealed was never meant to travel beyond those walls. But secrets have a way of leaking, through cracks no one notices until it's too late. And while Catherine was left alone with the kind of fear that rewrites a mother's entire world, the palace was already bracing for impact, because deep down, they knew this moment could not stay buried forever. To truly understand the gravity of what happened, we must go back to the signs no one noticed and the symptoms the palace chose to ignore. Prince Louis had always been seen as the palace's playful light. His cheeky grin, his mischievous energy, his moments of spontaneity endeared him to the public, but behind that smile were subtle signs, missed by many, dismissed by others, and written off as just a phase. Now in hindsight, those signs feel terrifying. What were the clues? And who made sure they stayed buried? It began with small things, barely noticeable at first, a delay in forming words, moments when his coordination faltered unexpectedly, quiet pauses during play that once seemed imaginative but now raised alarms. The royal calendar moved relentlessly, public appearances, engagements, carefully staged photo opportunities, and Louis was expected to perform on cue. But behind those polished images were moments of hesitation, confusion, a silence no one wanted to name. At public events, staff began noticing how quickly Louis would tire. A few minutes of waving, then clinging tightly to Catherine's hand, visibly drained. Clips surfaced online showing him zoning out during ceremonies, blinking slowly, detached. Fans found it adorable. Commentators called him overwhelmed. But inside palace walls, whispers began. Something wasn't right. It was the nanny who first voiced it aloud, softly, cautiously, to a senior aide. She had seen countless children grow. Louis was different. She noticed how he struggled with instructions, how his balance wavered, how he sometimes froze when overstimulated. She wasn't calling for panic, only concern. But concern inside the royal machine is dangerous. Catherine heard it. She felt it long before anyone dared say it. A mother always does. Her connection with Louis was deep and instinctive, and it told her something was wrong. Yet every time she raised her worries, every time her voice trembled with concern, she was met with tight smiles and rehearsed reassurances. Boys develop differently. He's under enormous pressure. He just needs time. But it wasn't time she feared. It was what they were wasting while pretending nothing was wrong. Family videos once filled with joy began to feel like warnings. The birthday clip where Louis didn't respond to his name. The garden photo where he stared blankly into the distance for seconds too long. Catherine replayed them obsessively, searching for patterns, praying for misinterpretation. But the truth only grew louder. Specialists were contacted quietly, discreetly. Catherine wanted certainty, not tabloid speculation, not palace protocol, but answers. Tests were ordered and then stalled. Someone inside the palace pressed pause. Optics, timing, privacy. Unforgivable excuses. Louis was slipping through the cracks of an institution more concerned with image than protection. And the woman who had spent years surviving with grace under royal pressure was finally beginning to break her silence. When Catherine demanded answers, palace politics ignited a war, one that pitted a mother's instincts against royal tradition. She begged for clarity. They gave her protocol. Her pleas were stonewalled by advisors loyal not to her but to the crown. What were they protecting, and how far did they go to delay the truth? In the days that followed the initial diagnosis, Catherine realized she wasn't just battling illness, she was battling an institution. She asked for second opinions, for independent specialists beyond palace-approved channels. Each request was denied. Not yet. Not necessary. Not advisable. Beneath every refusal was the same message. Wait. Be quiet. Stay in line. To Catherine, it felt less like caution and more like control. The truth wasn't being investigated, it was being managed. Tension erupted between Catherine and her private secretary, once considered one of her closest allies. Late one evening, sources say she confronted him, her voice shaking with fury. Why are you protecting the institution instead of my son? There was no answer because none could justify it. William found himself torn between two worlds, a devoted father, a future king, raised to serve something larger than himself. Catherine leaned on him, but insiders say he urged patience, faith in the process. The process was suffocating her. Charles had been informed. His response, sources claim, was clinical, duty, narrative, legacy. Not once did he say Louis' name. That omission spoke volumes. And then quietly, Camilla's influence moved behind the scenes, advising restraint, framing Catherine's concerns as emotional instability, suggesting she was becoming difficult. Whispers turned into decisions. Catherine wasn't just ignored, she was being silenced. Until the lake. It wasn't meant to escape, but one encrypted email detonated everything, sent anonymously to a journalist known for exposing what others wouldn't touch. Inside were details only palace insiders could know. Medical terminology, dates, internal memos. The diagnosis had been known for weeks. The fallout was instant. The palace panicked, communications froze, emergency meetings erupted, but it was too late. The story exploded globally, hashtags trended, the public demanded answers. Catherine learned. D from her phone. Not from aides. Not from William. Her fury wasn't aimed at the journalist, but at the silence that forced desperation into action. And finally, the truth emerged. The diagnosis was rare, neurological, progressive, genetic, no cure, only management, no guarantees, only uncertainty, speech, motor skills, cognition, all at risk. Every milestone would be a battle. And with that truth came a devastating realization. This wasn't just about Louis. It was about succession, image, stability. And at the center of it all stood a mother shattered beyond measure. When Catherine fully grasped the diagnosis, insiders say she collapsed, screaming, sobbing, clutching her chest in agony. "Not Louis," she cried. "Anyone but him." William's response was rage, at himself, at the palace, at every warning ignored. Guilt consumed him, and nothing, not crowns, not tradition, not power, could undo what had already been lost. For the first time, William saw the institution not as a legacy to inherit, but as a machine, cold, impersonal, and capable of sacrificing its own, and that machine had failed their son. The diagnosis marked the beginning of a new reality. Louis would require care, constant, evolving, deeply personal care that no royal calendar, no public appearance, no duty could accommodate. Royal obligations, carefully choreographed appearances, the relentless scrutiny of the public eye, all of it would need to be reconsidered, rewritten, perhaps abandoned altogether. The boy who once stood proudly on the palace balcony, waving to thousands of cheering subjects, now faced a life away from the spotlight. A life defined by therapies, hospitals, and painstaking milestones, not ceremonies, coronations, or public applause. And yet, as Catherine grieved what might have been, others were circling the throne with quiet, calculated ambition. The machinery of power never sleeps, and as she mourned, Camila moved. Sources say Camila saw Louis' diagnosis not as a tragedy but as a clearance, a rare opening, a power vacuum forming, and she was poised to exploit it. Behind the palace's polished facade, fault lines were cracking wide open, and in the center of that fracture, Camila stood composed, calculating, unmoved. Insiders reported that upon hearing of Louis' condition, her reaction was chillingly detached. One aide allegedly quoted her words exactly. "It's regrettable but clarifying. This was not grief. It was strategy. A reshuffling, the kind that opens doors for those patient enough to wait." Almost immediately, decisions began to shift behind Catherine's back. Advisors aligned with Camila quietly floated a new idea. Princess Charlotte should now be fast-tracked. The line of succession must remain intact. If Louis could no longer serve the traditional role, adjustments had to be made swiftly, efficiently. The tone was professional, cold, clinical. There was no room for empathy, only optics, only continuity. Camilla's camp did not pause to mourn, they mobilized. Meetings began small and informal, yet deliberate. Catherine was not invited. One particularly jarring report described her rival convening a private gathering in the palace wing, discussing media narratives, future roles, and succession optics. No mother, no wife, only power, only politics. When Catherine discovered this, she erupted. Tensions long buried finally ignited. Still reeling from her son's diagnosis, she confronted Camila, not with the decorum expected of a duchess but with raw fury. Sources say she demanded transparency, respect, inclusion. Camila responded with ice. "The monarchy must endure," she said. "It isn't personal, it is survival." For Catherine, the message was clear. Her grief was inconvenient. Her voice, her instincts, her presence, irrelevant to those who valued preservation over people. Charles, once the supposed center of royal unity, remained disturbingly passive. Those close to the situation claimed he justified inaction as neutrality for stability. Others saw it plainly, cowardice, a failure to protect his son, his grandson, and the woman he had once encouraged the public to embrace as their future queen. William, witnessing the quiet machinations, began to change. The bond he once attempted to maintain with his stepmother eroded. He heard the whispers. He watched loyalties fracture. His wife was being sidelined. His son was being erased, and Camilla was moving forward quietly, methodically, toward a future that did not include Louis at all. But Catherine refused to remain silent. Not anymore. And what she did next stunned even her closest allies. She was expected to fade into grief. Instead, she rose like fire. Her next move was not royal, it was maternal, primal, unstoppable. In a single stroke, she rewrote the palace narrative, forcing the crown to follow her lead. The palace wanted silence, but what they got was a roar. Just days after being excluded from decisions about her own son, Catherine acted with a clarity and fury no one anticipated, without warning, without consultation, entirely outside protocol. She published a statement not through the palace, not with approval, but raw and unfiltered, directly to the people. The message was brief but seismic. Louis is not broken, he is ours, and we will not be silent. 12 words that cracked the facade of the monarchy's iron grip. For the first time in modern royal history, a senior member bypassed the institution and spoke straight to the world, not as a duchess, not as a future queen, but as a mother. It wasn't diplomacy, it was defiance, and it struck like lightning. The public response was instantaneous. The statement went viral within hours. Millions reposted it, news channels scrambled, headlines were rewritten, celebrities shared their support. And outside the gates of the palace, something extraordinary happened. Flowers arrived, thousands of them. Cards, drawings, prayers, messages from children, mothers, and strangers alike. Not just sympathy, but solidarity. And with that outpouring came outrage. The public demanded answers. Why had the palace stayed silent? Why had Catherine been left to speak alone? Why had the monarchy failed to protect a 5-year-old child from internal sabotage and manipulation? Hashtags trended, op-eds surged. The story was no longer about a diagnosis, it was about a cover-up, and Catherine had exposed it. William, already disillusioned by palace politics, made a choice. For the first time, he publicly aligned not with the institution, but with his wife. He reposted her statement, adding 3 simple words. "We stand together." Those words sent shockwaves through royal circles. The future king had taken a side, and it wasn't the crown. Within palace walls, the atmosphere turned volatile. Charles could no longer hide behind neutrality. He was forced to choose, support Camilla's quiet strategy or back Catherine's public revolution. His hesitation only deepened the fracture. Aides splintered into factions. One source described it as a war without swords, but with consequences that could reshape the monarchy. Amid the storm, Catherine did more than defend Louis, she redefined him. No longer the fragile prince hidden away, Louis would become something else. Not an heir, not a royal symbol, but a beacon. Catherine reached out to specialists, charities, and advocacy groups. Plans formed to launch a new initiative focused on children with neurological conditions. This wasn't about titles, it was about truth, visibility, and strength in vulnerability. She wasn't asking for permission. She wasn't following rules, she was rewriting them. But every revolution has a price. The next betrayal came from the most unexpected place, someone she had trusted with Louis' life. The leak that exposed her family's pain had not just damaged the palace, it had shattered trust. The investigation moved quietly. Cybersecurity teams traced messages, examined logs, and when the culprit was finally identified, Catherine was speechless. It was someone close, a longtime aide, a fixture in her daily life, someone who had been there through pregnancies, tears, milestones, someone who had once rocked Louis to sleep. The betrayal wasn't professional, it was personal, brutal. Even more horrifying, financial records revealed payments from an overseas shell company, linked to media groups rumored to be connected to Camilla's camp. The implication was clear. Someone had bought access to Catherine's grief, not for truth, but for control. When she learned this, Catherine reportedly collapsed, not for show, but under the sheer emotional weight of it all. "I had no one left," she whispered. The aide was arrested, removed, statements were issued, but the damage was irreversible. The public, watching from the outside, saw through the palace's sterile response. They didn't see scandal, they saw sabotage. Loyalty to the monarchy fractured. People no longer wanted polished press releases. They demanded accountability, justice, and they rallied behind Catherine. Though gutted, Catherine didn't retreat. She began quietly removing lingering loyalties from her inner circle. No fanfare, no headlines, just strategy and silence. She vowed never again to be caught off guard. Brick by brick, she would rebuild on her terms. No more smiling for tradition, no more asking for permission. She had learned the cost of silence, and now she was done paying it. And as the dust settled, one question remained. What future awaits Prince Louis? He may never wear a crown, but he will define a generation. In the shadows of grief and betrayal, a new path emerged, for Louis, for Catherine, and for the monarchy itself. Catherine chose not to retreat, not to repair, but to rebuild, this time not just for herself, but for every child overlooked, misdiagnosed, or pushed to the margins. She launched a foundation quietly with purpose. Its mission, resources, education, and emotional support for families facing the same diagnosis that had upended her life. It bore Louis' name, not as a symbol of fragility, but of fierce resilience. This was no vanity project. Catherine threw herself into it with the full force of her grief, her rage, and her clarity. The foundation became her war, a war against silence, stigma, and a system that demanded smiles while children suffered behind closed doors. And the world responded. Donations poured in. Letters of support arrived from parents. Doctors offered expertise. The palace, once hesitant, was forced to acknowledge something it had tried to suppress. Compassion, not protocol, is what the public demanded. Meanwhile, Louis, protected but no longer hidden, began his own quiet journey. Catherine shared glimpses of his therapy, his struggles, and his small victories, not fully, but enough to humanize a boy once destined to be a footnote. Louis' presence redefined royalty, not as perfect, scripted, or untouchable, but real. His bravery, vulnerability, and spirit became symbols of strength. In this transformation, William and Catherine became unshakable, united, no longer bound by palace rules or tradition. Their partnership, forged in agony, was now rooted in truth. They stood not just as heirs, but as parents fighting for change, and in doing so, earned the unwavering loyalty of the people. Charles faded into the backdrop. His silence during the scandal left a lasting scar. Approval ratings plummeted, public sympathy cooled. Where once he commanded respect, he now faced accusations of cowardice. Camila, too, found herself increasingly isolated, her influence waning under the weight of a narrative she could no longer control. Catherine rose, not by decree, not by inheritance, but by heart. She became the voice of a new generation of royals, shaped not by diamonds and duty, but by devotion and defiance. The monarchy, once a symbol of unattainable perfection, began to evolve. And it was Catherine, not Charles, who led that evolution, not with authority, but with authenticity. Louis may never sit on the throne, but his story, his journey, has already reshaped the palace from within. He exposed the cracks, and through those cracks, something unexpected bloomed: truth. And though the palace walls may still guard their secrets, Catherine has already won the hearts of the people.